All right, let's dive into something pretty intriguing today. Population control and how it all ties into sustainable development. We've got some fascinating sources lined up to really unravel this.
Yeah, it should be interesting.
Yeah, we're talking Thomas Malthus' essay on the principle of population, going all the way back to 1798.
Oh, wow.
We're going deep into Chapter 11 of Agenda 21 Exposed.
Okay.
And we're going to be kind of cross-referencing these with official Agenda 21 documents and even some relevant YouTube insights.
It's really like piecing together a puzzle. We're going to see how some of these historical ideas are maybe playing out in modern policies, especially ones that, focus on poverty and food security and how we manage our resources.
Right. What we're really trying to get to the bottom of is there a hidden agenda behind all of these sustainable development initiatives, like Agenda 21?
Right.
Is it all about global well-being, or is there something more to it?
Well, that's what we're here to explore. Why don't we start by going back in time, back to the 18th century with Thomas Malthus.
Okay.
He's often considered like the architect of population control theories.
So Malthus comes along in 1798, publishes this book, an essay on the principle of population that really shook things up. Like, what was so groundbreaking about his ideas?
Well, he argued that population growth, it was always going to outstrip our ability to produce food.
Oh, wow.
And that this would lead to like scarcity and conflict. He believed that this was like an inevitable cycle.
And he wasn't exactly like an optimist about humanity's chances, was he?
Not really, no. He saw this cycle as like a fundamental law of nature.
Yeah.
And he believed that attempts to help the poor without addressing population growth would actually just make things worse.
Okay, so what did he propose as a solution?
Well, he advocated for what he called moral restraint.
Moral restraint.
Which included things like, delaying marriage and practicing abstinence. He believed these measures were necessary to, slow down population growth and prevent like the inevitable collapse.
Okay, so those are some pretty drastic solutions.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to the present day, and we have Agenda 21, a UN initiative aimed at promoting sustainable development.
Right.
How does Agenda 21 Exposed connect these dots between Malthus and modern-day policies?
Well, Chapter 11 of that book argues that Malthus's ideas have been kind of subtly woven into Agenda 21.
Okay.
And it suggests that the focus on things like reducing poverty and hunger could be part of a larger plan to control population growth.
Okay, that's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah.
Can you give us some concrete examples of how Agenda 21 Exposed makes this connection?
Sure. Let's look at Sustainable Development Goal 1, which focuses on ending poverty.
Okay.
Agenda 21 Exposed suggests that the data collection that's involved in these initiatives could be used not just to track progress, but also as a form of like surveillance and control.
So under the guise of helping people out of poverty, there might be a more sinister motive at play.
Well, that's what the book is suggesting, yeah. It raises concerns that, this data could be used to, monitor individuals, assess their compliance with certain norms, and potentially even restrict their access to resources if they don't conform.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this ties back to Malthus's idea of controlling the population to manage resources.
Exactly. Malthus believed that population control was necessary to prevent resource scarcity and social unrest.
Right.
Agenda 21 Exposed suggests that those same ideas are being implemented today, but just in a more, subtle and technologically advanced way.
That's a chilling thought. What about Sustainable Development Goal 2, zero hunger?
Right.
How does that fit into this narrative?
Well, Agenda 21 Exposed argues that, the push for certain types of diets, particularly vegetarianism, and the control over food production, could be another way to manipulate food access and ultimately population growth.
So they're saying that sustainable diets might not really be about health or the environment, but about controlling what people eat.
Yeah, that's the concern that they're raising.
Okay.
They suggest that these policies could be used to restrict access to, certain types of food, even if people prefer them.
Okay.
All under the guise of sustainability.
Okay, but isn't there a genuine concern about the environmental impact of certain types of food production?
Yeah.
Like meat production.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this issue so complex. There are valid arguments on both sides.
Right.
The question is, who gets to decide what's sustainable?
Right.
And how are those decisions made?
That's a good point. So it's about striking a balance between between genuine environmental concerns and individual freedom of choice. What's interesting is that we see this theme of using aid and resources as leverage in the National Security Study Memorandum 200, or NSM 200 from 1974.
Yeah.
This document is fascinating. It explicitly positions population growth as a threat to U.S. national security and proposes a range of strategies to address it.
Right.
And some of those strategies sound a lot like what Agenda 21 Exposed is warning about, right?
Yeah, for sure. NSSM 200 advocates for promoting family planning programs, including access to contraception, and it suggests focusing development assistance on countries that implement population control measures.
Okay.
It also mentions, the importance of working through multilateral organizations like the UN to advance these goals.
So we see this idea of using aid as a tool to influence population policies in other countries, which aligns with the concerns raised in Agenda 21 Exposed about a hidden agenda within Sustainable Development Initiative.
So it's these things.
And when you consider that Agenda 21 is a UN initiative, the connection becomes even more intriguing.
Yeah, definitely.
This is getting pretty deep. We've got Malthus's theories from centuries ago, a U.S. national security document from the 70s, and a contemporary critique of Agenda 21. Where do we even go from here?
Well, Agenda 21 Exposed goes on to analyze several more sustainable development goals.
Okay.
Arguing that they all tie back to this underlying theme of population control. And we've got another layer to explore as well. We can look the insights from Rosa Quar and her YouTube videos, which provide a more kind of grassroots perspective on this issue.
Okay, let's dive into that next.
Okay.
We've got a lot more to unpack here.
Yeah, we do. Welcome back to our deep dive into population control and sustainable development.
So far, we've unearthed some pretty thought-provoking connections, I guess, between these historical ideas about population control and present-day policies.
Yeah.
Now we're going to hear from Rosa Quar, an outspoken critic of Agenda 21, whose YouTube videos offer a more grassroots perspective on this issue.
Rosa Quar was a really key figure in raising awareness about what she saw as the hidden agenda of Agenda 21.
What were some of her main concerns?
Well, she argued that Agenda 21 is essentially a blueprint for global governance, aiming to control not just population, but also like land use, resource allocation, even individual behavior, all under the guise of sustainability.
That's a pretty sweeping claim.
It is, but she presented a lot of evidence to support her argument.
Okay.
Pointing to specific policies and programs that she believed were designed to advance this agenda.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. One of Quar's biggest concerns was this concept of smart growth, which is an urban planning approach that aims to create, more compact, walkable cities.
On the surface, that sounds like a good thing.
Right.
More walkable cities, less sprawl, better for the environment. What's the problem?
Well, Quar argued that while smart growth, it might sound appealing, it's actually a way to restrict individual freedom.
Okay.
And to concentrate populations in densely packed urban centers where they're easier to control.
So instead of like sprawling suburbs with single family homes and cars, you have high-rise apartments and limited transportation options.
Exactly. She believed that this was part of a deliberate effort to force people out of rural areas and into cities where they would be, more dependent on government services and infrastructure.
She also talked a lot about mega regions, right?
Yeah.
What are those?
Mega regions are large geographic areas that transcend traditional political boundaries.
Okay.
Often encompassing multiple cities and states.
So like the Northeast Corridor in the U.S.?
Exactly.
Which stretches from Boston to Washington, D.C.?
Right.
Okay.
Quar saw the creation of these mega regions as a way to undermine national sovereignty and to create a system of global governance where unelected bureaucrats would have more power than elected officials.
This sounds a bit like a conspiracy theory.
It does to some people, but Quar presented a lot of evidence to support her claims.
Okay.
Pointing to specific documents and policies that she believed were designed to advance this agenda.
One of her other big concerns was the use of public-private partnerships, wasn't it?
Yes. Quar argued that these partnerships, while often presented as a way to to improve efficiency
right.
and to leverage private sector expertise were actually a way to give corporations undue influence over public policy.
So instead of like elected officials making decisions, you have unelected corporate executives calling the shots.
That was Kaur's concern. She believed that these partnerships were being used to implement Agenda 21 policies without, proper public scrutiny or democratic accountability.
So she saw Agenda 21 as this kind of like shadowy force operating behind the scenes, manipulating governments and corporations
right.
to advance its goals.
That's a fair summary of her perspective.
It's a pretty bleak picture, isn't it?
It is, but Kaur believed that it was important to expose this agenda and to empower people to resist it.
Okay, we've heard from Malthus, Agenda 21 exposed, NSSM 200, and Rosa Kaur.
Right.
That's a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah.
How do we make sense of it all?
I think the key is to approach all of this information critically, recognizing that there are different interpretations of the evidence.
So we shouldn't just accept any one perspective as the absolute truth.
Exactly. We need to weigh the evidence, consider different viewpoints, and come to our own conclusions.
Okay, but where do we even start? There's so much information out there.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming.
Sure. I think a good starting point is to look at the Agenda 21 document itself.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's go straight to the source.
Okay. The official title of the document is Agenda 21, the United Nations Program of Action from the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. It was adopted by over 170 countries at the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro in 1992.
What does it actually say?
Well, at its core, Agenda 21 is a blueprint for sustainable development, outlining actions that countries can take to address a wide range of, environmental, social, and economic challenges.
That sounds pretty innocuous. Where does the controversy come in?
Well, the controversy arises from how these broad goals and principles are interpreted and implemented.
So it's not necessarily the document itself,
right?
But how it's being used.
Exactly. Critics like Kaur argue that Agenda 21 is being used as a cover for a much more radical agenda, one that seeks to undermine national sovereignty, erode individual freedoms, and impose a global system of control.
But supporters of Agenda 21 would say that's a misinterpretation.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They argue that Agenda 21 is simply a framework for international cooperation to address shared global challenges.
So how do we reconcile these vastly different interpretations?
I think it's helpful to look at specific examples of how Agenda 21 is being implemented at the local, national, and international levels.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay.
Let's start with Sustainable Development Goal 1, which focuses on ending poverty.
Right. Agenda 21 recognizes that poverty eradication is essential for sustainable development.
That makes sense. You can't have a sustainable society if a large portion of the population is living in poverty.
Exactly. Agenda 21 calls for a range of actions to address poverty, including, investing in education and healthcare, promoting sustainable livelihoods, and ensuring access to basic services.
Okay, but how does Agenda 21 exposed interpret this?
Well, the book suggests that these poverty reduction programs are being used as a way to collect data on individuals and to control their behavior.
So it's not just about helping people. It's about gathering information and exerting control.
That's the argument.
And what about NSSM 200? Does it shed any light on this?
Well, NSSM 200 explicitly states that population growth in developing countries is a threat to U.S. national security.
Okay.
And suggests using foreign aid as a lever to promote population control measures.
Yeah. So there's a precedent for using aid as a way to influence population policies in other countries.
Yes, and that's what makes the claims in Agenda 21 exposed more plausible.
Okay, let's move on to Sustainable Development Goal 2.
Okay.
Zero hunger.
Right.
What does Agenda 21 have to say about food and agriculture?
Well, Agenda 21 calls for promoting sustainable agricultural practices, conserving biodiversity, and ensuring food security for all.
Those sound like worthy goals.
They are, but critics like Quare argue that these initiatives are being used to control food production and distribution and to limit individual choice.
So instead of having like a wide variety of foods to choose from, we'll all be eating the same government-approved sustainable diet.
That's the concern.
And Agenda 21 Exposed suggests that this is a way to control population growth.
Yes. The book argues that limiting food choices and controlling food production are part of a larger strategy to reduce the population.
What about NSSM 200? Does it mention food as a factor in population control?
Well, NSSM 200 suggests that food aid should be used strategically to promote population control measures in developing countries.
So again, we see this theme of using resources as leverage.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on to Sustainable Development Goal 7.
Okay.
Which focuses on affordable and clean energy.
Right. Agenda 21 calls for increasing energy efficiency, developing renewable energy sources, and ensuring access to energy for all.
These are all goals that most people would support.
They are, but critics like Quare argue that the push for clean energy is being used as a way to control energy production and distribution.
Okay.
And to limit individual freedom.
So instead of having a choice of energy sources, we'll all be forced to rely on government-controlled renewable energy systems.
That's the argument.
And Agenda 21 Exposed suggests that this is another way to control population growth.
Yes.
Okay.
The book argues that controlling energy is essential for controlling population.
And what about NSSM 200? Does it address energy in relation to population control?
NSSM 200 doesn't specifically mention energy in this context.
Okay, let's move on to Sustainable Development Goal 8,
right.
which focuses on decent work and economic growth.
Right. Agenda 21 calls for promoting full and productive employment, fostering entrepreneurship, and creating a favorable environment for economic growth.
These sound like positive goals.
They are, but critics like Quare argue that these initiatives are being used to promote a globalized economy that benefits corporations at the expense of workers and small businesses. So instead of like national economies with strong labor protections, we'll have a global race to the bottom where workers have no rights and corporations rule supreme.
That's absurd.
And Agenda 21 Exposed suggests that this is part of a larger plan to create a more manageable and controllable population.
Yes.
Yeah.
The book argues that economic globalization is a way to concentrate wealth and power in the hands of a few, making it easier to control the masses. And
what about NSSM 200? Does it address economic issues in relation to population control?
Well, NSSM 200 argues that rapid population growth in developing countries hinders economic development and could lead to social unrest.
So the idea is that a smaller, more manageable population is better for economic growth.
That seems to be the underlying assumption.
Okay, let's move on to Sustainable Development Goal 11.
Okay.
Which focuses on sustainable cities and communities. Agenda 21 calls for promoting integrated planning and management of urban areas, improving housing and sanitation, and developing efficient and environmentally sound transportation systems.
Again, these sound like reasonable goals.
They are, but critics like Quare argue that these initiatives are being used to promote high-density urban development, restrict freedom of movement, and create a system of surveillance and control.
So instead of like sprawling suburbs with single-family homes and cars, we'll all be living in densely packed urban centers where our movements are tracked,
right,
and our lives are micromanaged.
That's the dystopian vision that Quare paints.
And Agenda 21 Exposed suggests that this is the ultimate goal of Agenda 21.
Yes, the book argues that concentrating the population in urban centers makes it easier to control and manage.
And what about NSSM 200? Does it address urbanization in relation to population control?
Well, NSSM 200 mentions the challenges of rapid urbanization in developing countries, but it doesn't explicitly link it to population control.
Okay, so we've looked at 5 of the Sustainable Development Goals and how they're interpreted by critics like Quar and the authors of Agenda 21 Exposed.
Right.
What's the takeaway from all of this?
I think the takeaway is that there are legitimate concerns about how these goals are being interpreted and implemented.
So it's not just a fringe conspiracy theory.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
There's evidence to suggest that some of the concerns raised by critics are valid.
But there's also evidence to suggest that Agenda 21 is a genuine effort to address global challenges.
Yes, that's also true.
So how do we navigate this complex landscape?
I think it's important to stay informed, to be critical of all sources of information, and to engage in open and honest dialogue about these issues.
Okay, so we need to do our own research, think for ourselves, and talk to each other.
Exactly.
This has been a really thought-provoking discussion.
Yeah.
I think we need to take a break and come back for a final segment to wrap things up.
I agree. There's a lot to process here.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's been quite a journey, really, unpacking these arguments around Agenda 21 and the idea of a hidden population control agenda.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
We've gone from the theories of Thomas Malthus to the claims made in Agenda 21 Exposed.
Right.
We even got into the perspectives of Rosa Quar.
Yeah, it's been a wide-ranging discussion.
We've seen how these seemingly, disparate sources connect in these unexpected ways.
Yeah, definitely.
It raises these important questions about the true intentions behind certain sustainable development initiatives.
Right.
And we've explored kind of the complexities of interpreting Agenda 21 itself, recognizing that there are valid arguments on both sides of the debate.
Oh, absolutely.
So where do we go from here? Like, what are some key takeaways for our listeners as they kind of navigate this complex and often contentious landscape?
Well, I think one of the most important takeaways is the need for critical thinking.
Yeah.
We've seen how easily information can be manipulated and interpreted to fit certain agendas.
It's crucial to be discerning consumers of information, to question everything, and to seek out multiple perspectives.
Exactly. Don't just accept what you hear at face value, whether it's from, the mainstream media or alternative news sources or even from seemingly authoritative figures.
Yeah.
We need to do our own research, weigh the evidence, and come to our own conclusions.
Another key takeaway, I think, is the importance of understanding history. We've seen how ideas about population control have evolved over time, from Malthus's theories to the policies outlined in NSSM 200, and how these ideas continue to kind of shape the debate today.
Absolutely.
By understanding the historical context, I think we can better assess the validity of claims being made about Agenda 21 and other contemporary initiatives.
Sure.
It also helps us to recognize that these issues are not new. Concerns about population growth, resource scarcity, and the role of government. I mean, these have been debated for centuries.
Yeah, they're ongoing conversations.
And those debates are likely to continue as we grapple with the challenges of creating a sustainable future.
Absolutely. There are no easy answers. And any solutions we come up with will require, careful consideration and a willingness to compromise.
This deep dive has really highlighted the importance of having open and honest conversations about these issues. We need to be able to discuss different perspectives, challenge assumptions, and work together to find common ground.
I agree. It's easy to get caught up in our own echo chambers and to dismiss perspectives that differ from our own.
Right. But if we want to find solutions to these complex challenges, we need to be willing to engage in respectful dialogue with people who see things differently.
And we need to be mindful of the potential for unintended consequences. Even well-intentioned policies can have, unforeseen negative impacts if they're not carefully thought through.
Oh, exactly.
So critical thinking, historical awareness, open dialogue, and a cautious approach to policy making. Those are some valuable takeaways from our exploration of Agenda 21 and the idea of a hidden population control agenda.
And I would add one more takeaway, the importance of individual empowerment.
Yeah.
We've seen how easily people can be manipulated and controlled, whether it's through, propaganda or misinformation, or even through, seemingly benign policies.
Yeah.
It's crucial to be aware of these tactics and to empower ourselves with knowledge and critical thinking skills. We need to be active participants in shaping our own future, not passive recipients of whatever agenda is being pushed on us.
Exactly.
Well said. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, and it's raised more questions than answers.
Well, that's the nature of deep dives, right? They're not about finding definitive answers, but about exploring complex issues and stimulating further thought and discussion.
And hopefully that's what we've achieved today. Thank you for joining us on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas and engaging in these crucial conversations.
Remember, the future is not something that happens to us. It's something we create.
Yeah.